He finally said it. Sukai's late-night confession about Tan Songyun shocks the industry. He finally said it. And the moment the words left his mouth, the entire industry stopped breathing. Sukai's late-night confession about Tan Songyun was not planned. It was not rehearsed. It was not filtered through managers or polished by PR teams. It was raw. It was real. And it was the moment everything changed. Hold on tight, C-Drama family. The world of your favorite celebrities is unfolding before your eyes, and every moment is more breathtaking than the last. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications right now, because trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming next. For weeks, silence had been their shield. A silence built out of fear, duty, contracts, and pressure. A silence that had stretched so long and so painfully tight that something was bound to snap. It snapped last night. It was nearly midnight when Sukai appeared alone, unannounced, outside a private hotel conference room where executives from his agency were holding an emergency strategy meeting. No cameras. No reporters. No fans waiting outside. Just industry insiders, startled staff members, and the low hum of tension filling the hallways. Witnesses said he looked exhausted, like someone who had spent days wrestling with a decision he could no longer contain. His hair was slightly disheveled. His eyes were sharp but tired. But beneath that exhaustion was something more dangerous. Something resolute. He walked straight past security. Straight past his own manager. Straight into the conference room. Inside, the atmosphere froze. Phones were set down. Laptops paused. A dozen faces turned toward him, waiting for him to sit, to explain, to negotiate. He did none of those things. Instead, he closed the door, stood at the head of the long polished table, and said the words that ignited the industry's greatest shock in years. He said he was done hiding. The room erupted at once. Executives protested. Agents raised their voices. PR specialists begged him to reconsider. But Sukai did not stop. He told them he was tired of pretending. Tired of acting like the scandal meant nothing. Tired of denying someone who mattered more to him than the silence they were forced to live in. Then he said it. He admitted, clearly, without trembling, without hesitation, he had loved Tan Songyun for years. The room fell silent. Not because they agreed. Not because they understood. But because they had never expected him to speak the truth so plainly, so boldly. He said he had tried to move on. He had tried to bury it under work. He had tried to obey the industry's rules. But every time he walked away, he found himself turning back. And then he revealed the moment that changed everything. The moment at the secret safe house. The moment when Tan Songyun asked him the question he couldn't answer. Was he still running? He told the executives that when she said she was tired of hiding, something inside him cracked. Because he realized he had never been tired of her. He had only been tired of the fear. When he reached this point in the confession, some staff members were said to have lowered their eyes, unable to maintain the professional distance they were trained to hold. Because it was the first time Sukai had spoken like a man who wasn't acting in a drama, but living one. And then came the moment that stunned even the hardest executives in the room. He said that if the agency wanted to terminate his contract, they could. If brands wanted to drop him, they could. If the industry wanted to punish him, he was ready. But he would not deny her again. The confession spread through the building like a voltage surge. Phones buzzed. Screens lit up. Messages crossed departments until the entire agency knew the unthinkable had happened. Sukai had chosen truth over image. Tan Songyun over silence. Love over fear. By the time he left the room, the industry had already begun vibrating with rumors. Private chat groups exploded. Executives in other companies were alerted. Streaming platforms held emergency midnight calls. Several brand representatives went into crisis mode. And then, just when the world thought the confession could not get any more explosive, a second revelation leaked. One of the executives, shaken by what they had heard, anonymously shared a line from Sukai's speech. A line that hit the internet like a meteor. He said he had planned to propose. Not during the rehearsal. Not during the scandal. But months earlier, long before the world heard their names together in a single sentence. He had bought a ring. He had hidden it in his apartment. He had waited for the right moment. But fear, pressure, and the impossible restrictions of their industry kept him frozen. Until now. Those leaked words spread through the internet faster than any scandal headline. People began asking the same question. Was Sukai about to go public with everything? Was he ready to risk his entire career for her? Was this confession the beginning of something bigger than the scandal itself? The answer came only an hour later. Tan Songyun's manager confirmed that she had been informed of the confession. And then the final twist landed. She asked to speak to him. Tonight. Face to face. Not as co-stars. Not as colleagues. But as two people whose lives had been cracked open by a truth too powerful to bury. And now, the world waits. Every platform. Every fanbase. Every insider. All watching for the next move. Because the question now is no longer about secret recordings or hidden relationships or quiet scandals. The question now is whether they will step into the future together. Whether the proposal he kept hidden will finally see the light. Whether his late-night confession was not the ending of a scandal, but the beginning of their truth. The room was still humming with the aftermath of Sukai's late-night confession when the next twist arrived. A confession is one thing. A truth that reshapes an entire narrative is another. And for the first time in months, people inside the industry sensed that he was not just speaking from the heart. He was preparing the world for something much bigger. What he said next would ripple far beyond the entertainment circles. He finally looked up from the table, the soft lamplight tracing the edges of his exhausted face, and said the words no one expected him to admit out loud. There was someone he had been protecting. Not himself. Not his career. Not his clean reputation. Someone else. Someone who, without ever asking for it, had been at the center of every accusation, every rumor, every tightened throat at a press conference, every frantic meeting behind locked studio doors. Someone the industry had quietly warned him to keep his distance from. And he had ignored them all. He leaned forward, the weight of everything he had hidden crashing into the space around him, and he said a name. Not whispered. Not hinted. Said. Her name. Tan Songyun. The producer interviewing him froze, his pen hanging useless in midair. Even the recording equipment seemed to pause, as though the room itself understood the gravity of that moment. Sukai did not blink. He did not stutter. He did not correct himself or hide behind vague language. He said her name again, this time slower, almost steady, as if anchoring himself to something real in a sea of chaos. He said he could not keep lying anymore. He said he could not watch her take the blame for things she did not do. He said he could not let her walk this path alone when half the world wanted to distort her into something she was not. And then he said the sentence that made headlines explode before dawn. I never walked away from her. I only let the world think I did. There it was. The fracture line. The point where silence broke clean into two pieces. Because those were not the words of a man confessing to a harmless rumor. Those were the words of a man admitting to something deeper, something that had happened behind closed doors, something that no camera had ever caught, something that even their closest colleagues had only guessed at. The confession was real. But the storm it unleashed was even more real. Within minutes, people inside the industry were scrambling. Communications teams were waking up executives. PR handlers were pulling up files they hoped would never see the light of day. Agencies were calling board members. Contracts were being reviewed. Damage control was being mapped out. Meanwhile, across the city, Tan Songyun was still on set filming a late-night scene. Her phone was off. She had no idea that her life had just changed. But the world was already reacting for her. Some fans were cheering. Some were panicking. Some were furious. Some were heartbroken. And in the middle of all this, a quiet question began circulating. What was he referring to? What was the moment so big that he had to break silence now? What did they hide to protect each other? Because Sukai's words, they were not the end of the story. They were the doorway into a truth the public had never been allowed to see. A truth the industry had spent years burying. A truth tied to a night almost no one knew about. A night that forced him to choose between his career and her safety. A night that he has never spoken of. Not until now.